All right, everyone, welcome back to the Principia podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Iverson, and I'm joined today by Cassie Anglin. Today we're going to be talking about mindset and building a subconscious and why it's important in such things. But first, let's introduce Cassie and hear kind of some of her story and what makes her valuable to this conversation. Go ahead, Cassie.
Hi everyone, my name is Cassie Anglin, and I always like to define myself as a holistic wellness coach, a light worker, and a self-love advocate. I do coaching for women specifically, but for anybody that really need help in accountability and changing their life and changing their mindset specifically, and how to just create more joy and more fulfillment in their life overall. And mindset is a huge part of that, and understanding your subconscious mind and how it works is a really huge part of that. So I'm excited to be here today.
Cool. So building the subconscious. I mean, it's a mindset thing that we try to do, and we always tell people 90% of your actions are happening on a day-to-day basis due to your subconscious. So if you're not, at least in some way, trying to get that subconscious to align with exactly what you want in life, then you probably are either going to fail to reach it, or it's going to be a very, very stressful accumulation of problems over time. And maybe you accomplish it, but it could have been so much better. Let's define, I want you to define mindset for everyone first.
Yeah, your mindset is the way that your mind works when you're not thinking about it. That's what your subconscious mind is doing. So like Mitch said, 90% of your mindset takes place without you even knowing it. And so by understanding how your brain and your mind are working, when you're not even thinking about it, you're not even critically taking action on it, that can really help you implement changes and make the proper changes, because you understand the beliefs that you may have that you didn't even realize.
Yeah. So kind of the reason for talking about this so much today is that at Principia CrossFit, and I believe with your practice as well, we believe that it's probably the first thing that you need to address. I mean, ultimately, we talked about the watershed method last week on the podcast, so if you haven't listened to that episode, you probably want to listen to that one first. But that one's more about setting out your desires and your vision for your own life. Once you have that, now this is the next phase for us, is how do we build somebody's subconscious so that they can be accomplished in their goals or in what their vision is for their life. And we believe that this step cannot be skipped, and if it is, you're playing with fire in a bad way, and you're probably just going to get bit. So that's our next step for us, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we incorporate it into our process and things like that. But let's talk a little bit about how this subconscious and mindset stuff affects our day-to-day in our lives.
Yeah, so when we talk about your mindset and your subconscious running your life, your subconscious is created up until you're 8 years old, they say. So your critical mind doesn't actually start until you're 8 years old. So everything that's happened to you in your life, anything a parent has told you, the world has told you, society has told you, just becomes a truth in your life. And it's in the back of your mind all the time, and how shows up in the way that you are going about the things that you do with your life. So if you really believe, I can't do X because of how my family is or because of how I was raised, that's going to show up continuously in your life, whether you realize it or not. So our subconscious mind can affect the way that we make change, because like Mitch said, if you're playing with fire. If you're trying to make a change, you can only willpower so far into change before your subconscious mind and your limiting beliefs take back over.
Yeah, so that was super interesting what you said about that 8-year mark. I'm sure that's not like a hard standard, but
Right.
but I think as a parent of a child who's 10 now, I've kind of seen that, like not consciously in this case, but I kind of feel like there was that moment but there's now moments where I'm like recognizing that he's putting this puzzle together now, and he doesn't need, it's really interesting that you said that. I couldn't quite identify like very specific things with it, but you saying that just triggered in my mind, I do see that, like that 8 to 10 range that he's in now has just been like it's like you're seeing this little adult forming,
Right.
Instead of seeing him as a kid so often.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, it was just you literally have to do everything for the child, right? Like, so that's super interesting that you talked about the critical mind being formed after like 8 years old.
Yeah.
That's super cool. But yeah, so basically what we're trying to get at is that if this has been happening since 8 years old and you've never spent any time recognizing it and identifying what your limiting beliefs are and what is a limiting belief, what's a limiting belief?
Limiting belief is any belief that you may have about your life that is limiting you from becoming the person that you want to be.
Right.
Simple definition.
Okay, so that, taking that simple definition, we can try to apply it to like a real life situation. I already kind of told you what I was going to apply this to, and the viewers are going to be shocked. But basically, in our society, a limiting belief is that you cannot marry your sister. All right, we can all agree on that. That's super weird.
Yeah.
But technically, that is a limiting belief, right? When you really think down to it, if that's what makes two people happy and that accomplishes their vision, then they've just taken away a limiting belief and they've had success in what they wanted, right? It's not fun to think about because we know that, there's going to cause some birth defects and whatnot if they do have children or whatever. But the point is, for those individuals, it's about limiting beliefs, right? So you need to identify what your limiting beliefs are and whether they're servicing you or not, right? To me, that limiting belief, that services me, right? It's going to prevent me from some serious problems probably.
Yeah.
So for me, that's going to serve me. So I'm going to keep that limiting belief. But I'm also recognizing that it exists, right? So not being ignorant to your own limiting beliefs is important. And I use that because it is so shocking to hear, like, it's an acceptable thing for somebody. What? Like, yeah, it's not for me, but I mean, to each their own. So I'm not going to judge them too hard. But at the same time, it's like, this is part of the process, is we have to come to an understanding of what our limiting beliefs are. We have to probably, in my opinion, you got to write them down too.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Would you explain a little bit more about recognizing maybe not just the beliefs, but also maybe some habits as well?
Yeah, so I'm just going to use an example because of maybe people that come to your business of somebody who is overweight. And maybe their limiting belief truly is something like, my family can't be fit. Or, in my family, our genes just aren't good enough, so I'll never have muscles. Or something along those lines. So if that truly is your limiting belief and you don't recognize that, and you can't properly build the habits that will take you into building muscle or losing the weight or anything like that, because you're always, willpower, again, will only get you so far.
You're butting heads with yourself a little bit.
And then eventually you will always go back to your old ways of maybe eating too much or being lazy or, not doing the right habits, so to speak, because your limiting belief has kept you from that.
Right. Think about like this river, right? A river is going to flow from A to B no matter what you do. It's going to find its way to B no matter what. That's just the way it works, right? Unless you throw a dam in there and like you do some serious like teamwork. But one individual is not going to make any impact on this river really.
Yeah.
Right? So looking at this river, it's flowing in this trajectory. There are things you can do along the way, right? So when the current gets a little slower, you might be able to paddle upstream, but that's only going to last so long. You might be able to course correct as far as which side of the stream that you're on, but you're never ultimately able to stop that stream from reaching its endpoint. So think of your limiting beliefs as the endpoint, right? Or your beliefs in general, not limiting. Your beliefs are the endpoint. So if some of them are limiting you at accomplishing what you want to achieve, because you haven't made that your belief yet, then the river's never going to reach it. So like right now we're basically telling somebody to look in the mirror and say, it's not my genes, it's me, it's my decisions.
Yes.
And it's not as easy as that, right? Like we're not just going to, if we wake up every day and say, I am this, which is a tactic that we use for sure, it's a positive affirmation, it could over time start making an impact on your life. But it could also just open the door to where the real change could happen. But how else might we get this change in beliefs and taking away that limitation? So I like that example of the genetic one, because I think everybody uses genes as a limiting belief. And I truly believe that doesn't really exist, because I don't believe that I look like any of my family members, and it's because I act very differently than all of my family members. Now I'm not, obviously there's genetic things like physically on my face, right? Like my lips are going to be formed a certain way, but I can get surgery for that. But anyway, so I guess sticking with the gene thing, how are we going to take that person who's like, I can't lose weight because of my genetics? How do we take that person? What's the next step for them?
I believe that journaling is a really huge tactic or way that we can address what our limiting beliefs are. And I know that you do a lot of work with that. It's with your clients of visualizing what their dream life would look like, or really getting out, despite anything that we might be getting our way, what would we love for our life to look like, or our body to look like, or whatever the case might be. And by understanding that the vision can be possible by implementing the right habits and understanding what our limiting beliefs are, that's when we can implement proper habits to start making that change.
Right.
But journaling and visually seeing and looking yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, this is something that I believe that's not true, that's the first step. You have to address that maybe what you believe isn't a truth in your life anymore. Cool.
Yeah, no, that resonates really strongly, I think, with me. And I have my own life journeys and struggles. And you talk about like financial health and salesmanship and things like that. And those are all struggles for me that I had some limiting beliefs that I'm trying my best to abandon. And it's a process. It's not an overnight fix.
Right.
So how long, like when you work with your clients, Cassie, what are your time frames that you give them to start seeing the results?
So when I do wellness coaching with clients, I like to do 3 to 6 month sessions. We do it bi-weekly for 1 hour every time. But the reason I choose the 3 to 6 month range is because change doesn't happen overnight. There really is no such thing as a sustainable quick fix in our life. If we want it to maintain those habits and really see positive change happen, it's going to take a course of time. So 3 months is even still on the smaller end of that, but a 6 month time frame can take you through so many different seasons in your life. You will run into problems that you maybe didn't expect to come up, or you will, it'll be Christmas and you'll have reasons that you'll have excuses for something, or whatever the case might be, and it'll really take you through the roller coaster that our lives really do take us through.
Yeah.
And then
it's not a linear path.
Right, having a coach or somebody that's keeping you accountable on your habits and on your mindset and your changing and your limiting beliefs can help you navigate and bring you back to your why you're wanting to make those changes.
Yes. Okay. So in that, you said 3 to 6 months is kind of the range that you don't accept less than.
Right.
Obviously, you probably accept more because it's a constantly progression type thing for your life. Nobody's the master of it 100%. Even the highest of achievers usually have a hired coach for the same thing.
Right.
So that being said, I guess I just want to understand a little bit more about the time frames and why we're choosing these time frames. And maybe what I think about is that person who's finally deciding that their motivation is to the point where they can go and physically take action in the gym, right? So they go in to take action at the gym, but what do we see most often with somebody who just finally got the motivation? They go and take action in a gym. Let's call it a Globo gym, where you just kind of show up and you pay your monthly dues. Why does that not last for somebody?
They haven't understood what their beliefs are.
They didn't address it, right? They skipped the step.
Yeah, it's
just trying to emphasize it for everyone. Like when you skip that step, your success rate is significantly lowered.
It's that New Year's mentality, right?
Yeah.
New Year's resolution that this year I'm going to start going to the gym every day and I'm going to lose however many pounds or look a certain way. And if you didn't establish your why or the reason behind why that won't be a continual habit for you, you're going to fall off in the 1 to 2 months like mostly everybody does.
And I think with establishing the why too, it's not as simple as writing down on a whiteboard what your why is. You have to workshop that why a little bit. You have to explain why that why is the why in the first place, and then what you are really going to gain from it. You know what I mean? Like you have to really give that why a ton of power and a ton of time. And I think that's a several month process as well. And I think it needs to be revisited and always be kind of changed. So if you have one sentence written on your board, the next month it probably shouldn't say the exact same thing. It should probably say something a little different, but still align with those goals, because you're constantly working and transforming it into the life that you want to make it.
Yes.
So if you're looking at joining a gym, but you haven't worked on your mindset, maybe that's the first stop if you really want to be successful.
Yes.
Or you could come here where we're trying to work on it simultaneously. So the way we try to weed this in, so you use these 3 to 6 months, we do something similar, where at first we take people on in a one-on-one setting. So one coach, one athlete, 100% of the time. And it's a 1-hour session. In that session, we're moving our bodies. We're starting to learn about fitness. We're starting to learn all that stuff, because learning is great and it feeds the mind a little bit, but it also lends people to why things are becoming important.
Right.
So if we explain how mobility is super important, because if you have full range of motion of a joint, then you're less likely to bend over and pick up a pencil and never want to bend over and pick up a pencil again.
Right.
Right? There's things like that are going on in people's life, and that's real incidents.
Yeah.
Like, people hurt their backs brushing their teeth all the time. You need something in your life to be confident that it's never going to happen again. And that's hard to get over when something as simple as brushing your teeth hurt your back or something. So anyway, we start with this one-on-one. We build a lot of awareness, and we start recognizing those things through some exercises that we do, like breathing, visualization, meditation, journaling. We kind of do it all, and we try to find what works best for that individual, so that they can take that practice and they are aware that that practice is what works best for them. Then after that, we go into it's called our Tide class. And our Tide class is a smaller group class that half of the class is designed specifically for the individual. So everybody's kind of doing their own thing, but it's designed by one of our coaches. And then the other half of the class, we bring them together. We have that workout, but then once a week, we actually sit down and we mindset the hell out of that day.
Yeah.
So we usually do that on Thursdays. And we have them bring their journals in. We tell them, this is the prompt today. This is what you're going to write about. We're going to share it, because it brings a little bit more value when it's shared and it's not kept with the walls closed off and everything. So we're trying to get this weeded into our system enough to where you can come here, take those action steps that you're motivated to take, but also make them sustainable for the rest of your life.
Right.
Which is kind of what you were explaining happens to that New Year's person. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right? And we want to make sure that anybody who walks in here is successful, which is why we don't work with anybody who is not ready to take on all those challenges, right? Of not just fitness. Everybody who comes in here wants fitness right away.
Yeah, of course.
I have to slow them down. I have to be like, look, I know you want that. That's the thing that we're going to give, but we have a process, and it needs to start here because of the longevity of it.
Yes.
You can't start somewhere else and expect the same result, right? So that kind of I was just kind of explaining to you guys exactly how each of us work on those things. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more into when we're journaling and things like that. Can you maybe talk about soft talk and what we're trying to avoid?
Yeah, so having that talk, you were saying the example of I'm trying to think of a good example.
Yeah. I would like to achieve this. Let's say the goal is I would like to lose 20 pounds by 2021.
Right. And so when you're writing it down in your journal, you need to use affirmative words that are saying, I will lose 20 pounds by 2020, not maybe, or when I feel like it, or...
So would is that one soft talk word in the sentence of I would like to, but also like is a bad word too. I mean, we take these in our journaling exercises and, all this training, we're trying to eliminate these words from people's vocabulary so that they can be more affirmative when they talk to people.
Yes.
So not only does it improve their communication with others, it really improves their communication with themselves.
Yes.
And that's super important, because we spend so much time looking in the mirror and saying if only and what if, that it would be so much more impactful if we were saying I am and this will.
Yes.
Right?
And you're building that confidence in yourself, and when you follow through with it, you can, I believe that building that self-confidence is building a trusting relationship with yourself. So if you can write down, I will lose 20 pounds, and you follow through with it, you're going to be way more likely to pat yourself on the back and want to achieve the next thing than maybe I will, or I would like to lose, and then never following through with it. Then your limiting belief comes back in and you say, I can never lose the weight. It's because you weren't affirmative about the thing that you want.
Right. So even when we sit down with somebody and we're having that first conversation, in that conversation, I'm trying to identify if they actually trust themselves.
Yes.
Right? Because if they don't trust themselves, then they're not going to be successful.
Right.
So what I do is I try to lay out how we handle things. And if I'm feeling like they don't trust themselves to accomplish based off of what I laid out, then what I want to do with that person is, instead of taking them on and taking their money, I want to send them to somebody who can help them.
Yes.
Right? And in some cases that could be you.
Right.
If I find that it's just this mindset thing, they don't trust themselves, they need a coach that's going to enable that. And it could be therapists, and it could be a mindset coach. It could be anything, right? But the goal is for me to find what works best for that individual. The goal is not for me to take their money and then run, right?
Yeah.
Which, if they're not going to be successful, that's just taking their money and running.
Right.
But yeah, so soft talk, how you talk to yourself, building that confidence, super important step in the process.
Yeah.
And it is a process that's not an overnight fix at all, but it helps a ton when you start talking to yourself in the correct way. Cool. So I guess I want to talk about, like, when people go through this process of changing their subconscious, what are some tactical things other than journaling that you might do with somebody?
One of my favorite things to do is, honestly, positive affirmations. And the reason behind that is, some people really do feel like, I'm just lying to myself, or they don't really believe it yet. But research really has shown that when you, on a consistent basis, affirm to yourself, I am wealthy, I am fit, I am confident, whatever you would like to have in your life, those I am statements, your brain doesn't know the difference between present, past, and future tense. It only has the concept of what you're telling it. So if you're constantly waking up every morning and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm fit, or I can lose 20 pounds, the more that you actually are going to convince yourself to believe it. So positive affirmations really are a big thing that I use in my practice specifically, because it is building that confidence in yourself, and it takes time. It's not something, you say it to yourself one time and the next day a light bulb clicks and you're all of a sudden understanding the process of how to get there. But I know, at least even for myself, the places that I've needed to build my own confidence in business building and things like that has been when I use positive affirmations and I say them to myself in the mirror or write them in a journal all the time, to a point where I believe that that's true. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, after a year of saying, I'm going to make X amount of money, that's going to manifest in my life as something that actually happens. And so I'm a huge believer in positive affirmations, and I really think it can help change the way that your brain is wired to function.
Do you feel like there's like a moment in time when you feel it taking place now? Like, you've been journaling about it, you've been doing these positive affirmations. Is there just like a moment of realization and clarity for people? Or is it like just 3 to 6 months later or whatever, you're just suddenly different?
Right. I think that there really is, at least for me, and I have seen in clients as well, a moment of self-doubt that is released in that topic.
Okay.
So, for example, I'm trying to think of a client of mine that, what did she want to do? She was trying to eat better. And what she was saying was, like, it is easy for me to make healthy food choices. And by saying that to herself every day, of course, every day she wouldn't be successful. She would binge on sugar, she would make the wrong choice, and that's life, that's what's gonna happen. But the more she wrote it down, she had less self-doubt in her ability to make those positive food choices.
Okay. So there's some value to punishing a kid by making him write on a chalkboard.
Right.
Over and I will not. Okay. So I think positive affirmations are great, and I do think that when I'm talking about like that one moment in time where maybe you realize it, maybe there isn't a moment all the time, but we use fitness a lot of times we're trying to relate what we do here to their life. A lot of the time is kind of the goal, and people will do it for themselves a lot, but there'll be that moment of realization here a lot, because basically you couldn't jump on this object and now you can.
Right.
Like, that's the moment of realization that all this work that you just did is paying off. But I think sometimes we're detriments. We stand in our own way and we create negative affirmations in front of us. Like, I'm thinking in training a lot, like when I don't find a certain movement enjoyable just because it just like is boring or whatever it is, or maybe the duration is too long, I'll start using negative affirmations, and over time that comes out of my training altogether.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, down the road you realize that there's a missing piece in your training, and then you go, oh crap, I just took out overhead pressing because it just didn't feel smooth, and over time, I told myself, well, I could do less reps, and then it turned into less reps. Okay, I could do it once a week. Now I could do it once a month. And then over time, you actually just end up going downhill instead of uphill. And it's all because I kept telling myself it wasn't serving me.
Right.
So you can see it in that. Like, I think a lot of us could probably find in our own lives negative affirmations that have been successful.
Yeah.
Not that they're good to be successful in, but if we just flip the script and we start working on those positive affirmations, I think you can also see how that would be successful too.
Yeah. And to piggyback on what you just said, maybe that is the thing that you're having a negative affirmation about is your own limiting belief. Like,
right.
This lift does not serve me. And so you're slowly finding ways to not do it anymore subconsciously. It's all on that subconscious level.
Yeah, I hate the assault bike. I'll find ways out of that thing any day.
Same, I hate that thing.
I mean, 100%, and injuries are like that too. Everybody who sustains an injury that lasts longer than they expected, which is almost always the case, the road to like pain-free fitness isn't like this, right? You're going to have these moments of doubt, and that's when it's super important to have the positive affirmations and a coach to make you stop dwelling on that negativity and instead focus on the positivity. So just to kind of wrap things up, I think what we want to talk about is why building the subconscious is just the most important thing that you could do for yourself.
Yeah.
So what are some things that happen if we build our subconscious?
I think that if you can acknowledge your subconscious and what those limiting beliefs are, you can start implementing habits that will serve you instead of get in your way. And by doing that, that's when you start accomplishing more, right?
Yes, 100%. So I think accomplishment, you don't get it if you don't build the subconscious. Right. 90% of the time, let's say.
Right. And then also, fear can no longer run your life because you've built that relationship with yourself, that you trust yourself, you're saying these positive things to yourself all the time.
Yeah. Another way to think about that too, so I've been trying to flip the script a little bit on the fear thing. So we talk about fear not running our lives, but instead let's talk about how we can leverage ourselves off of fear,
right,
to create opportunity and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how we become empowered, is by actually recognizing the fear and what's surrounding it, and then utilizing our feelings based off of that, how
100%.
to leverage ourselves into the person we want to be,
Yes.
a more confident person, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to flip the script, instead of getting people to not want fear, getting people to actually engage in fear intentionally.
Yes, because it's always going to be there. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
use it for your benefit instead of your downfall.
Yes, yeah, I think it's totally possible and doable.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, I think if you build this subconscious, like, it's almost like you're having fun through mistake. Like, you're just like, life is happening and now you're in the present moment more, and you're just finding the enjoyment in life.
Yeah, you are in control of your life instead of your life controlling you. Your circumstances aren't in control of the way that you feel.
Right, and then let's make sure we really let people know there's always going to be this dip.
Oh, of course.
And we're gonna recognize that, and we're gonna minimize the dip, right? So then the path doesn't look straight up, but it maybe has small dips, but it keeps rising to a greater degree than it was before.
Yeah.
So then by the time you're done with it, your dip is where you started.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Which I think a lot of people can resonate with that a little bit, in that when they're in a good place in life and they're having a bad day, they think back to the worst day of their life, and they're like, well, it's not that. Right? So that dip can not go that low. No, things within our control anyway.
Right.
I think one of the greatest benefits of it too is going to be the energy that you just feel.
Yes.
Right? So walking around instead of like a zombie, just you're thrilled about life, which means you are going to do the things that you need to do to accomplish more and more and more.
Yes.
As long as you're constantly working on it.
Yep.
It's not going to go away.
Yeah. And then obviously you'll feel more positively about yourself and your life and like the people around you. You're not going to be a victim necessarily to the circumstances or the things that happen or the beliefs that you have. You're going to be excited and happy and want to enjoy your life a little bit more.
And the people around you.
Yes.
They're just it's going to be like gravity. People are going to glue to you. So anyway, we got to wrap things up. I hope you guys have learned a little bit about the subconscious and how we at Principia CrossFit do it, and how Cassie Anglin does it in her practice as well. Do you have any one last message to give the viewers?
Yeah, so I really hope that you guys learned a lot today. If you want to learn more about my business specifically, you can follow me on Instagram at I am Cassie Anglin, and I'd love to chat with you guys a little bit more.
Cool. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Reach out if you guys have any questions. It's been a pleasure doing this, and I definitely would like anybody to reach out if you have topics you'd like us to cover. This has been Mitch and Cassie. We out.